Anyway, good morning. So this is video number 2. I'm going to try to see whether I can somehow or other. Anyway, I'm going to try to produce a video a day or a video every 2 days or something like that. Anyway, I encourage you to follow the sequence of the videos as I'm making them, because one thing is going to build on another. And you know what? I'm really sorry for the technical weirdness of the picture taking, because the camera's going in and out of focus and shit like that. But I haven't got any professional equipment. This is just being made on my phone. So first of all, I didn't really give myself much of an introduction last time, but I do want to just say that I am not any kind of authority figure on this, topic. I'm a completely self-educated person. I don't have any university degrees, and I am, in fact, a shoemaker. I've also developed software. I spent almost 13 years developing some very interesting software for medical scheduling. And my hobbies, I suppose, are language learning. I've always also loved nature. I've studied plants and other things. Anyway, so the point is, don't expect to be talking to somebody from a podium at Harvard or something like this. I'm talking to you from a shoe shop, and I think it's kind of beautiful, actually. So the first topic that I want to talk about today is, part of why I wanted to even give this introduction is to say that the philosophy of meaning that I'm going to try to give birth to, in a way, is self-discoverable. And that's one of the fundamental principles of it. This is, in a way, everything I'm trying to do is just trying to help, because it's a very confusing world out there. There's people with all kinds of conflicting belief systems and all kinds of knowledge out there, and the stuff that we're bombarded with, not to mention just stupid, idiotic distractions. It's an environment, and the environment is very, very full and very, very hard to orient oneself in. But theoretically, the philosophy that I'm going to be talking about is self-discoverable. Now, so let's consider, first of all, the problem that we have when communicating with each other. So to illustrate that problem, I'm going to ask a question. What is D flat major? You know what? I have no musical theory. I don't know anything about music. So all I know is it's a musical term. I mean, I know that D is a musical note. I know that, flat is opposed to sharp or whatever, but I really don't know anything about it. So somebody with a musical education is going to listen to that and they're going to say, oh, I mean, that's kind of obvious, isn't it? Well, it's obvious after you are already immersed in the theory and in the language. So in order for us to have meaningful conversation, I'm going to try to establish some language points and build on them. And so we need to start somewhere. And the way that I've was speaking about in the last video, there's a central idea, and then there's what I call radiants. Ideas that one can look at from the point of view of the central idea. So what is the central idea? The central idea is meaning. And I'm going to give you what I think is a very interesting way. I'm not going to call this a theory. In a way, it's a tool. Uh, and what it is it's it's a language piece that we can begin to use together to talk about uh, what's to come in terms of looking at the big questions in life. Okay, so some years ago, uh, if any one of you that were there at the time happen to remember this, we did this exercise, and the exercise is as follows. Imagine right now a moment that was meaningful in your life. And try to bring yourself to the memory of that moment. Everybody in their life has certain moments that marked occasions when they could say that they had a sensation of meaning. Oh my God, my life was meaningful at that moment. And along with that is a kind of feeling that this is close to, you know, it's in the direction of what I'm searching for, that sense of vibrancy, that sense of being alive. Okay, so in a group of people, uh, every single person will have their own individual story, right? In one case, it's a tragedy. That it was the moment that somebody died, and there was a sense of connection to that individual. It could even be the death of a pet or something. There's just this recognition of some of the larger connection to life. Very often, people report the kinds of things like, "Oh, well, when I was on a canoe and a lake and the sun was setting, and suddenly, I was overwhelmed, or I was meditating on a mountain, or the first time I met my lover." Anyway, every one of those experiences has something in common. So, what is it that they have in common? It's not the exact circumstances. What they have in common is that at that moment, the person was absolutely living the experience. That means that they weren't dreaming about being in some other place. They weren't designing the next workbench or the next revenge plot or whatever's going on, like in the course of an ordinary daydreaming type mind, future, past, mixed model, whatever. No, at that moment, they were actually living the experience. Okay, so simple idea. This gets back to why I say this philosophy is self-discoverable, because the idea here is that in every moment of meaning, there is an attribute of being present. There's an attribute of immediacy, of living in the moment. This simple idea establishes that meaning, there is a relationship between meaning and the direction of immediacy. Okay, so I've just introduced another term, which is immediacy. And what I mean by that is that immediacy is our connection to the immediate world. As opposed to another form of consciousness, which you can say is future and past oriented. So there's immediacy at one end, and there's action or imagination, and I'm not using that as a negative term, at the other end. So let's talk about those two poles, and then I'm going to introduce an image that about these two. So immediacy, first of all, is relative. Theoretically, it may be actually impossible for us to have a truly immediate relationship with the world. And like, I'm not at all interested in, the philosophical points of what's possible or what's not. The whole thrust of this of the philosophy of meaning is actually to be useful. And so we just don't want to get caught up in, all these things. But they're interesting questions anyway. Is it possible? Immediacy means, let's take it in at least close to an absolute, in its absolute form, which is, it's an uninterpreted view of the world. In other words, it is a direct connection. So try to think for a moment about what that experience has been like in your own life. And now recall a moment, and you can even feel that, as we're engaging together, that we get closer to this kind of a moment where I'm in direct relationship with the world. Okay, so I'm going to give you a piece of imagination, which sounds contradictory about it, but I'm regarding waking up, and I have a cup of coffee in my hand, and I'm sitting at the table, and I'm not thinking about anything. The sensation of the warm cup is in my hand. The steam rising from the cup is showing a beautiful pattern as the light shines through the window. And I'm not thinking about yesterday or tomorrow. I'm literally, these impressions from life are reaching me in a direct way. And this is a very simple, very, very nourishing experience. Everybody has this kind of experience, right? Okay, so on the other end of the spectrum, there is so there's nothing interpreted. I'm not saying, oh, it's a cup, it's steam, it's light, it's there's no naming it. I'm just literally experiencing it. So the other, as we move in the direction of an interpretive relationship with reality, I know this sounds like really theoretical, but it's actually just so fundamental to the way that we operate. I look onto the workbench and I see a long, skinny object that's fat at one end. What is it? That's what the mind says. What is it? Immediately, it's interpreted. It's interpreted, oh, that's a screwdriver. That's the screwdriver that I'm looking for. Why am I looking for the screwdriver? I'm looking for the screwdriver because I need it to do something. So in my mind, in my imagination, there is already a future plan of action. And there's a relationship with, there's a need to identify this thing as a screwdriver in order to get that job done. So in absolute terms, imagine that the brain was just severed and there was only an uninterpreted reality. It means I'd look at the workbench, I wouldn't see a screwdriver. I would see the light shining on stuff, and I would see dark and images and whatever, but I wouldn't be saying, oh, it's a screwdriver. So the moment that I look at an object and I I identify it. This is called identification. It's a screwdriver. So we'll get back to this concept over and over and over again. And a little bit, perhaps, like maybe it would be useful to say a little bit more about how the interpreted mind works. Okay. I gave you an example of a screwdriver on a bench. Why do I need to interpret my environment? Like, why do I need... Not that this is a conscious thing, this is a completely automatic thing. We take it for granted. It's so automatic that it almost seems like, why are we even talking about this? But the way the mind works is it interprets reality. So as I'm walking, it's not an uninterpreted vast expanse under my feet. I think and interpret it as a floor. There's a line demarcating the floor. Oh, I see. Oh, that's the beginning of a carpet. And I adjust my manner of walking because I have prior experience that suggests that carpets are more easily tripped on, that it's not the same slippery surface as a floor, so my body adjusts so that I walk across the floor. All this kind of thing happens inside in the mind in a flash, right? We don't need to think about it. It's automatic. And the ability for us to interpret our environment is critical to our survival, right? It is critical to our survival. So that's a very important point. Why is the interpreted mind? Why imagination? When I say imagination, I mean we create images, we store them in our memory, and we match the images that we see in the current reality with stored images to try to interpret that reality. Okay? Why do we need to do that? Well, we need to do that in order to survive, right? I need to know that a door is a door. I need to know that a floor is a floor. If you want a more, exciting metaphor for that, let's imagine that I'm walking in the woods. Ooh, it's not that familiar an environment, so I'm a little bit more alert, right? Maybe there's a bear or something like that. So in the context of walking in the wood, there's a little bit more of this other mind that's engaged. A little bit more of this need to receive the immediate impressions, right? And to try to interpret them. You can see that there's a gradation here in the way that our consciousness works. Over there, I see there's a gray lump. Oh. The mind says, what is that? Right? It's a question. It didn't interpret it yet. It's a question. Why does it need to ask that question? Because the answer to that question could mean life or death. Is it a wolf or is it a rock? This is the way the mind works. We ask the question, is it a wolf or is it a rock? Oh, it's interpreted very quickly. Oh, it's just a rock. On we go. Ooh, what a big mistake. I misinterpreted it. It's a wolf, and it's coming after me. Oh, you see how important it is to be able to interpret the world correctly? That's what I call truth-seeking. You see, it's not something about enlightenment or something like this right now. Truth-seeking is about having a correct interpretation of reality. Actually, truth is about, having a correct interpretation of reality. Truth seeking is asking the question, what is reality? So you can see, oh, we're already getting into such interesting territory. So these are language points. Immediacy, or immediate perception, and interpreted perception. Right? Immediacy and interpretation. These are two fundamental attributes of the human possibility and the way that humans are constructed. Everybody has this, okay? So, what I want to talk about now, and that actually, I'm not going to talk about it now because it's 20 minutes and I'm trying to keep these things to 20 minutes. So you'll have to wait till tomorrow. Tomorrow, we're going to talk about meaning.